Now let's look at our principal parts page. Now going back to the NIFAL imperfect, so we want to learn the basic pattern for the NIFAL imperfect. It is yipakade, yipakade. And let's contrast that with Picard's Cal imperfect. It's yif code, yipakade. What's the same here? What do you see as the same? Well, yeah, it's got the same prefix, right? The imperfect 3ms is characterized by prefix yod with no ending. The NIFAL imperfect 3ms is prefix yod and no ending. Those are the same. What's different? The internal pointing, right? The Curic's the same under the prefix, so that's good. But in the Cal, I had no dot. NIFAL, I get a dot. What kind of dagesh is that? That is a dagesh lene. How do I know that's a dagesh lene? I'm sorry, not dagesh lene. That's a dagesh forte. It's because it is preceded by a vowel and it's still here. Okay, so that's a doubled pay. Then I have a kametz under root 1, yipa, and then a sere theme vowel for root 2. Okay, so let's go over to our practice sheet and we'll see how this works. Okay, so looking at the imperfect here, what did we learn was the vowel pattern for the NIFAL imperfect 3ms? It's ye, doubling dot, pa, kade. Yipakade. Yipakade. Now, that dagesh forte, where is that coming from? Why is there a dagesh forte in this pay? It's because this is what we originally had. Yin, pa, kade. All right? You see your 3 root letters. What is this noon right here? That is the NIFAL noon. Okay? Yin pakade is what I should have had. But what happens when a noon closes a syllable and then butts up against another consonant? What is that process called that happens to the noon? Yes, this was our Borg problem, right? It's assimilation. We have this assimilation issue. The noon is going to become a doubling dot in the final consonant and disappear. And that's why we have yip with a doubling dot in it. So it's yin pakade becomes yipakade. Okay? Now, here's the deal. If you know the basic form, and you know all of your imperfect nutty prefixes and suffixes, guess what? You can parse any NIFAL verb that's normal in the imperfect. Okay? Let's remind ourselves. What are the nutty prefixes going down the line? The 3ms is yod. 3fs is what? Tav. 2ms? Tav. 2fs? Tav. 1cs? Aleph. Good. 2fs also gets what on the end? Everything's 0 ending on the left side except for 2fs. That becomes Kirik yod. Good. On the plural side, it's a prefix yod and what on the end? Shurik. 3fs is prefix tav and na. Remember that? 2mp is prefix tav with shurik on the back. 2fp, prefix tav with na on the back. In other words, the 3fp and 2fp are the same. 1cp is prefix noon. All right. What is the vowel pointing here? Every form of the nutty prefix is going to get an I-class vowel. You see Kirik is an I-class vowel, right? So I'm going to want I-class vowels here. Ye, pa, kade. T, pa, kade. T, pa, kade. T, pa, kade. Can I leave that sere here with tipakade? I'm sorry, with the Kirik yod tipakedi? No, this is a vocalic ending, which means it's a vowel, and the vowel is going to cause root 3 to slide over, right? That's going to leave this open and pre-tonic. What will it do? It will reduce to what? To a vocal shava. Now notice I have a vocal shava here and I have a kametz to the right of it. That makes it look like a kametz katuf, a short O, doesn't it? But this is really a long A. Yipakade, tipakade, tipakade, right? So this is tipakadi. So what do I need to ensure that the reader knows that that is a long A? Exactly. I want a metheg there. Tipakadi. And that allows us to pronounce that shava vocally. Tipakadi. Tipakadi. And then for the 1CS, I would like a kirik as well. Ipakade. But the aleph has a vowel preference, doesn't it? What does aleph like if it can get one? Well, all gutturals like A-class vowels, but aleph has a preference for segol, doesn't it? So I am more frequently going to see epicade instead of ipicade. Okay? Epicade. Epicade. All right? So is that still an I-class vowel? Yeah. It's still I-class, but it's the I-class vowel that aleph prefers. And all the other ones will get the kirik. Okay? So, yipakade, tipakade, tipakade, tipakadi, epicade. All of the nutty prefixes are the same that you've already learned. We just have different vowel pointing for the imperfect. Now, let's just talk real quickly about how we might translate these with that passive idea. If the cal imperfect of pakad, yifkod, is he will appoint or he will visit, let's do visit, then what would the nifal imperfect, yipakade, mean? He will be visited. Okay? The imperfect will translate as future in this case, and the nifal part of it will make that future passive. Okay? So he will be visited. So how would I translate tipakade, the 3FS? It's she will be visited. The 2MS, tipakade, is you, man, will be visited. Tipakadi is 2FS, so it's you, woman, will be visited. And epicade would be translated how? I will be visited. All right? Now, looking over at the plural side, what am I going to do? Well, I'm going to add my vowel pointing from the basic form. Y, pa, kade, and then the shurik, yipakedu. What's going to happen to my sere when I add that vocalic shurik at the end? It's got to reduce to vocal shava. All right. It's got to reduce to vocal shava. Yipakedu. And what am I going to do to ensure that long A vowel is pronounced? Got to put a metheg here. Yipakedu. All right. For the third feminine plural, yipakade. I'm going to borrow that pattern. Tipakade. Going to add na here. And there's one change that's going to happen here. Instead of a sere, I'm going to get a pathak. Tipakadna. Okay? Tipakadna. Now, I'm not asking you to memorize these forms over here. I'm asking you to memorize the basic form. And then when you see these extra things, you'll be able to tell that it's not 3MS, but 3FP. Could you parse that? Absolutely. If you know tippa is the nifal imperfect vowel pointing, and you see the prefix tav and the na, then you could very easily say, oh yeah, that's got the nifal vowel pointing, kirik under the prefix, doubling in root 1, and a kametz. That's nifal. That's imperfect. And the tav prefix, na suffix, tells me that it's 3FP. Okay, so you could parse that, even if you don't remember that the sere becomes a pathak here. But it's tipakadna. Tipakadna. So this is they will be visited, and they, women, will be visited. The 2MP, what am I going to do? Add a kirik, add a doubling dot, add a kametz. The basic pattern is a sere here, but when I add the shurik, what will happen to the sere? It becomes vocal shava. Tipakadu, and I'm going to use a method to ensure my pronunciation the proper way. Tipakadu. 2FP, tipakadna. So both of these mean y'all will be visited. And then finally, 1CP, got to use my prefix noon, double root 1, kamet's under it, and sere, using my basic vowel pattern here from yipakade, nipakade. How will I translate that? We will be visited. Okay? We will be visited. All right. So that is your basic pointing for the nifal imperfect. Now let's take a look at the principal parts page here. The next principal part is the WCI 3MS, or the Vayiktal 3MS. What have we learned about the Vayiktal, or the WCI? Well, we've learned that it is basically identical to the imperfect, except we have the special pointing of the vav prefix and the doubling dot in the nutty prefix letter. Okay? So, if we've already learned the nifal imperfect, all we have to do for the nifal WCI is add the vav prefix the way WCIs point the vav. Okay? So there's really nothing new here, nothing earth-shattering. The translation value, though, is going to reflect the WCI translation value, which is what time frame? WCIs are past, right? So if I wanted to say va ye pa kade, then the nifal tells me it's got to be passive, and the WCI form tells me it's got to be past and passive. So he was visited. Okay? And for the 3MP, it's yipakadu with the special vav pointing. Va yipakadu. Okay? And that's they were visited. Okay? Same translation value in terms of the pastness of WCIs, but the nifal adds the passive notion. All right. Well, what do we learn about the jussive? Can you tell the difference between the jussive and the imperfect most of the time? Could we? No, we couldn't. So here's the good news. The nifal's jussive is going to be identical to the nifal's imperfect. But jussives are volitional. So instead of translating it as he will be appointed or visited, I want to express my will that this third person entity be appointed. So how am I going to translate that? It'll be something like, may he be visited or appointed, or let him be appointed. Okay? Still got to be passive because it's nifal, but we're going to add the volitional jussive semantics to it. All right? So let him be appointed. The cohortative. By the way, just because I have only representative forms here doesn't mean that that's all there is. Okay? I could have a second person jussive. I could have a third jussive that's third masculine plural, and that would be let them be appointed, and so forth. So I'm only giving you one of a range of possibilities on the principal parts. The cohortative 1CS is epikada. Now, let's take a look at our practice sheet here. I'll show you how this was formed. For the 1CS imperfect, it's going to be epikade. That's my basic imperfect 1CS in the nifal. What do you know about the cohortatives? The cohortatives basically take the imperfect 1CS and they add what at the end? They add a comets hey. Remember, the cohortatives add a comets hey. So epicade in the nifal is going to be for the cohortative epicada. Okay, where's the accent going to be? It's always going to be on the vocalic ending. Kamete is a vowel, so this is a vocalic ending. And since the dalet's going to slide over and go with the vowel, that's going to leave this open and pretonic. And what will happen to the sere? It's going to reduce. So it becomes vocal shava, and that means my kametz needs a metheg to signal that that's a long A. Epicada. Epicada. I could also see a kirik here. Ipicada, as you know. So segal or kirik are both possible. They're still I-class vowels. Okay? How will I translate this? As a cohortative, may I, but it's not active. It's not may I visit. It's passive. May I be visited or appointed. Okay? Epicada. What would the first common plural cohortative look like? Well, the imperfect first common plural in the nifal is nipakade. What am I going to add to make it cohortative? Add a kametz hey. What's going to happen to my sere here? It will reduce to a vocal shava, and I'll get a metheg here. Nipakada. How would we translate this? Just exchange the I for we. May we be visited. Okay? Or may we be appointed. Or let us be appointed or visited. Okay? All right. The next principal part under the cohortative is the imperative to ms, so the one with no ending. Look at the nifal's vowel pointing. It is similar to the imperfect yipicade, but it's not quite the same. It's hipicade. I've basically taken yipicade, all the vowel pointing for the nifal imperfect, and I've just replaced the yod with a hey. So I get a hey prefix for the nifal imperative, hipicade. Okay? Now, here's a question for you. Is this hey, is that one of your 4 nutty prefixes? No. So you should never see a nifal imperative and think that there's an imperfect prefix there. It's not. Remember what one of the things we said about the imperative is that the imperative it looks like the imperfect, but without the nutty prefixes, because we always chop those off, right? So you'll never see the imperfect prefixes on the imperative. So the hey that you're seeing has nothing to do with the imperfect. This is just a characteristic vowel that the nifal has adapted to make up its imperative form. The nifal uses the prefix hey for its imperative formation. But all the vowel pointing is the same as the imperfect. It's hipicade. All right? So let's just apply this now to the other forms. We'll go to our imperative here. And if my 2ms basic nifal imperative is hipicade, then the 2fs will be the same, hipicade, but with one minor change. What do I add to the 2fs on the back side? It's a kirik yod. Remember that? It's a kirik yod. Go back to your boxes here. You see how the imperative, the front end is always the same. There's no imperfect prefix. If there is a stem prefix, like the nifal has a hey, then you'll see the hey there. But the endings are these in the imperative. Either nothing, e, u, or na. So I've got the e here. So hipicade becomes hipicade. What's going to happen to my sere? It's got to reduce when I add that vocalic ending, right? So it becomes hipicade. And I get a metheg here. Hipicade. So how would I translate this? This is be visited. Feminine, is identical, right? I'm telling a woman, be visited. What would the form be in the 2MP imperative for the nifal? If I'm starting with hippocade, what do I add to the end to make it you guys? I add shurik, right? And that's a vowel, so what's going to happen? Dalet's going to slide over and lead the vowel, and the kof's sere will be open and pretonic, and it will reduce to a vocal shava. So I get hippocady. Hippocadu. That's telling a group of men, be appointed. And then finally, for you women, it's going to be hippocadna. Okay? It'd be hippocade, add the na, and remember the sere becomes a pathak here. Hippocadna. And that's telling a group of women, be appointed. Okay? You can see the I-class vowel, the doubling dot in root 1, and the kamets, and all these forms. That is characteristic of nifal pointing. And so that's going to be different from the kal pointing of the imperative. What's next is the participle. Okay? The participle is going to be pointed nifkad. It has a prefix noon visible here, nifkad. Where else did we see a nifal noon prefix visible? In the nifal perfect. Okay? Everywhere else, the nifal's noon assimilates, and it becomes part of the doubling dot in root 1. But in the nifal perfect, you actually see the nifal noon, and in the nifal participle, you see the nifal noon. There's one difference between these two. They look almost the same except for the theme vowel, right? You see I have a pathak under root 2 for the perfect. For the participle, I have a kamets. This is a short A. The participle gets a long A. I want to tell you something about that A. That long A is irreducibly long. Okay? So the nifal participle is going to be nifkad. Yes, nifkad. But instead of a pathak, which is what the perfect looks like, it's got a long A, and it is irreducibly long. Irreducibly long. It will not reduce to a vocal shava. What does that mean? That means if I want to make the participle feminine singular, nifkad becomes nifkada. Add a kamete. What would normally happen as this becomes open and pretonic? It would normally reduce to a vocal shava, right? It will not do that here. Okay? It is going to stay long A. That is a characteristic of the nifal participle. This passive, the accent's going to go to the end. It'll be nifkada. Nifkada. So it is going to stay where I normally expect it to stay, but the vowel reduction's not going to happen. Okay? It's irreducibly long, that kamets. Nifkad, nifkada. Nifkada. Okay? So if the kal participle means appointing, then the nifal participle, if it makes it passive, would be appointed. Appointed. Okay? And you can use these participles in the nifal the way you use other participles. I could say the appointed man. Ha'ish ha-nifkad. The man, the appointed. So just remember that if the nifal verb has passive meaning, then I'm going to be using the ed type of ending. Appointed, smoked, right? The smoked. I was going to say weed. I don't want to say that. The smoked tobacco. Nah. The smoked fish. Yeah, let's do food. That's better. Okay. Anyhow, the masculine plural form, nifkad, becomes nifkad what? Nifkadim. Okay? and I don't reduce the komets. And the feminine plural is nif, kod, what? Nif, kod, ot, right? Nif, kod, ot. And again, I do not ever reduce the komets. It's irreducibly long. Alrighty. Last two principal parts are the infinitives. The infinitives. The infinitive construct is going to be identical to the imperative form. So we have hippocade for be visited, and hippocade as the nifl infinitive construct, the act of being visited, or the act of being appointed. Okay? And just as with the cal infinitive construct, I could add pronominal suffixes to the end. I could also add prepositions to the beginning. So if I added a bet preposition, it would be something like when he was appointed. Okay? If I added a lamed preposition, it would be something like in order to be appointed, and so forth. And then the infinitive absolute has two forms, one with the hey prefix and the nifal noon assimilated into the pay, or with the noon prefix outside the pay and nothing before it. So nif code and hippa code. Okay? The operative thing being that the last part has the holum vav, or if it's spelled defectively, it could just be a holum, just like pa code in the cal infinitive absolute. Okay? And again, these will be used the same way. Emphasis uses, the infinitive absolute will occur with the main verb and share the same root. Complementary use, the infinitive absolute will occur with a second infinitive absolute, and one of them will match the roots of the main verb. So the more common use, of course, is the emphasis use. All right. Well, that's really all I want to say about how to form these. The last thing really to say from the chapter is how do we translate the infinitive, the nifal verbs